I think Abba just sent a message that we're live.
Welcome to SEPSA Talk. I am Evan Sapia Kisi, the host of SEPSA Talk. SEPSA is Center for Better Society Advocacy and Research Africa. SEPSA Africa is a non-profit organization that believes in a better society for all. We in SEPSA Africa believe that a better society begins with you and I. Hashtag, a better society begins with me. For more information, please log on to www.sepsaafrica.org. Please follow us on the various social media platforms: YouTube, SEPSA Talk, Facebook at SEPSA Africa, Instagram, SEPSA Africa, and Twitter at SEPSA Africa. Like always, today we bring you another interesting discussion on the topic, the fuel price hikes in Ghana, bread and butter issues. As of today, it is reported that the cost of crude oil has experienced about 42% increment since September 2020 in Ghana. These price hikes have resulted in rising prices for general goods and services, in particular basic staple foods in Ghana. Across the country, people are calling for the government to intervene. And in this episode of SEPSA Talk, we ask the questions: what do fuel price hikes mean for the growth of Ghana's economy? And what kind of interventions are needed by the government to help arrest the situation? And to help us deal with this important issue are Dr. Tio Echampon. He's an Africa Principal Consultant at IHS Market, I beg your pardon. He holds Doctor of Philosophy in Petroleum Economics at the University of Aberdeen. He also holds master's degree in petroleum and energy economics from the University of Aberdeen and a Bachelor of Science in chemical engineering from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. I must say that it's a pleasure to host you for the very first time. Welcome to SEPSA Talk, Dr. Tio Echampon.
My pleasure to be here.
Great. And our second guest is Rexford Kuku Isiama. He's currently a lecturer in the Department of Sustainable Energy and Resources at the University of Environment and Sustainable Development, Somenya in Ghana. He's also a doctoral researcher at the DSI NRF Sashi Industrial Development at the University of Johannesburg. He holds MPhil in Economics from the University of Ghana and Bachelor of Science in Economics from the Central University of Ghana. I must say it's also a pleasure to see you back on the show. Welcome once again to SEPSA Talk, Rexford Kukwesiama.
Thanks, Ivan. So happy to be back.
Great. And I must say that, like always, today we are also streaming live on Facebook. And those of you who are also joining us right here on Zoom, please don't forget to keep your questions coming, as we would allow our guest here to address them for us. So let me welcome you once again to today's show, Dr. Tio Echampon and Rex.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right. So quickly, I would like to start with you, Rex Esiama. And the question we ask first is, there seems to be this price hikes in fuel and other constituents of crude oil. What are the main drivers of crude oil prices in Ghana? The question people have been asking is, do politicians really have control over crude oil prices?
Right, thanks. So the simple answer I can give to whether politicians are involved in determining the price is yes. And No. So yes, because the government itself will control or will contribute in one way or the other to determining the price, because there is a tax component that is put on that adds up to determine the final price. But at the same time, there are also independent oil marketing companies that go out to bring in the product. And since they are firms and they are interested in profit, they also need to be given the chance to determine their price. So that is the no part of the thing. So you cannot put the blame wholly on the doorstep of the government. Currently, I'm aware that there's a price deregulation system, and that allows oil marketing companies to set a price at which they are comfortable to sell the product, making sure that they can earn enough profit from what they sell. Yeah. So that's it. I'll explain some other things in the course of the show, but for now, this is my position.
All right, thank you very much, Rex Isiama. I come to you, Dr. Tue Champo. What do you also say to that? Is it, I mean, Rex says it could be yes or no, depending on how you look at it, but what then really drives the price of crude oil in Ghana? Or if you could walk us through how price is determined in Ghana as far as crude oil is concerned.
Okay. So thank you once again. It's a good question you ask. So I think there are two things we need to decouple, which is the price of crude itself, and then the price of petroleum products, which is a derivative of the crude oil itself. But they're both affected by a number of things, and this is in relation to the point that Rex made. From where I sit, there are three key factors. Number one is the price on the international market itself. So here, in the case of crude oil, it is a widely traded product, and a country like Ghana is always going to be a price taker. So basically, if the price is $86 as it is currently today, that's what you buy, it on the market for. And it's the same thing with the petroleum products like gasoline, that is petrol or diesel, which we import largely into the country. So the first factor is that the price of the product you don't have control over, and then it is quoted in dollars. The second factor is the foreign exchange rate, the FX rate. So you bring in the product from outside, you buy it in dollars, and then you have to sell it in cedis. So you have an exposure on that side in relation to the dollar CD or euro CD exchange rate, and that has a big impact on the prices that consumers pay at the pump. And then the third factor for now, which Rex talks about within the control of politicians, is the taxes and the margins. And in Ghana's case, you have as much as 40–50% or so tax on various, petroleum products, and these all then go together into the pricing mix or the pricing equation. And you can understand that before the current regime, the deregulation or deregulated regime, what used to be the case was that government really was the player, commercial player, and regulator within the space. And then a few years ago, the decision was taken that you actually want to bring competition into the market, and therefore you allow different private sector players, both within the retail end of the market, but also the wholesale. So the wholesale is the bulk distribution companies, the companies that actually bring the product into the country, and then the retail end is where you just go and buy your petrol or diesel basically at the pump, the fuel stations. And the deregulation regime was to improve consumer welfare. To a large extent, we can say that you have a multiplicity of petrol stations all over the country. So that aspect of it, we can take yes. But the aspect of how the pricing itself impacts consumer welfare, we can then maybe go into it, because there's a lot of questions around that where you begin to see it, particularly in an economy like Ghana, the petrol prices have a big impact on like the inflation basket and the consumer basket, and any change has an impact on households and individuals.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tio Champo. Just a quick one here, but so when you describe the three main drivers, talking about the price on the international markets and also the fact that it's bought in dollars, so the exchange rate is a factor and government taxes and margins. I was wondering, what about the retailers and those who sell? Don't they have any role to play? Don't they also put any margin on it?
So the retailer's margin is all part of the taxes and margins that I talked about. If you look at the price architecture or makeup, there's as much as 13 or so different levies or margins or taxes on these products that come into the country. But at an aggregate level, collectively, that's about between 40 and 50% of the price markup.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe moving on to you, Rex. So we see this new system, which is a deregulation, which I'm sure we'll come to it as we look at its impact to the average consumer in Ghana. But then the question that people ask is that, I mean, yeah, beyond these factors that Dr. Tio Champon already enumerated, so what is really causing the underlying causes of increasing oil and gas prices? He did mention that Ghana is a price taker though, but people also have this feeling that we produce oil in Ghana, and so why do we keep seeing increasing prices every day on crude oil and its constituents?
Right. Okay. So the way I understand it, it comes down to a capacity problem. Even if you were producing, 200,000 barrels, if you needed to use it, you need to have a refinery that would allow you to extract the petroleum and the diesel from the crude before you could send it onto the market. The existing refinery that was supposed to be working, has been in a questionable status for a long time because of debt. I'm talking about the Tema Oil refinery. And what that happens is with the absence of a refinery, it means that your crude can be extracted, but you cannot refine it in your country. So you have to send it somewhere else, get that done, and then bring it back. Now, what that means is that you still have to go through the process of importing it. In other words, buying it in another currency, bringing it into your country, and then having to price it in Ghana cedi, because we spend Ghana cedi, we do not spend dollars. Okay, so that is one aspect of the issue. Another aspect of the issue is that if you are going to do the importing, and the firms that are involved in doing the importing are rational firms, and they're engaged in this business to make profit. So the margins that Dr. Champon was talking about become a central issue in the determination of the price, because apart from government's business, other firms who go out there, who have the capital to lift the petrol and get it to the shores of the country to sell, need to be compensated adequately, right? If you, apart from their own margins, there are also specific levies and taxes that are included in the price. Now, I almost always like to set the scene by going a bit into detail to provide some context and also explain some economic rationale. So first of all, the economy is assumed to be coming out of a period of contraction because of the COVID. People lost their jobs, the GDP itself, went down because people couldn't work, etc., etc. So the general idea is, if you're coming out of some period of contraction, or if it's deep enough and you call it a recession, what you would like to do is to give enough incentive for people to, what you would like to do is to find ways to increase government revenue, because government is the largest spender. So these taxes that are on the prices of petroleum have been introduced as a measure to raise revenue for government based on its expenditure during the COVID era. Some people may remember the government said they provided free water and free electricity, etc. So coming out of that situation into this year, the idea is that government will use these taxes to raise revenue for itself, to support, its operations, and then, try and fill the gap that was created because of the expenditures during the COVID period. That is one explanation. The other part has to do with sustainability issues, because Ghana, the economy of Ghana has long been burdened with legacy debts and interest expense on some of these debts. Also, these debts can be found in the energy sector. So there's some historical antecedents of debts that have been accrued in the energy sector, some of which the government has been able to deal with. But currently, it feels like the sustainable way, or the most practical way to address the debt situation, is to have some margin of the petroleum revenues that go to sorting any future debts that will arise in the future. Now, why is all of this important? Basic Microeconomics 101 will tell you that from the policymaker perspective, you have a better chance of raising revenue when you put your taxes on goods that are price inelastic. And by inelastic, we refer to those goods whose response from the consumers is very little when the price changes. In other words, what it means is that inelastic goods are goods that consumers need, right? They need in their daily lives. And the truth of the matter is, everybody needs, consumes the petroleum products in one way or the other. Maybe not directly, also indirectly, but more so if you engage a transport service, the person who provides the service will have to put petrol in their car. If you have your own car, you're going to pay for petrol. So technically, it makes sense that if you put taxes on things that people need, you are guaranteed some sort of revenue. So as Dr. Jampon said, with the 50%, between 40 and 50% of the taxes that are on the price, all these taxes are there to ensure that the government can raise enough revenue to basically continue its provision after the COVID. But in order to sustain the revenue, it will need to put it on goods that have inelastic demand, so that no matter what happens, they are certain that at a certain price, not much will change. People will still purchase petrol, they'll still purchase diesel because they need to move around. So even if today the price increases by another 1 cedi or another 30 pesos, yes, there will be complaints. People will express their frustration, but they will not stop buying. And that in itself is at the heart of this whole approach to government business and raising revenue in the energy sector.
Thank you very much. I'll come later to ask you whether this approach is good, as my colleague Albert will say, good for bread and butter issues. I get the sense in what you said. I mean, the fact that one way with which government could raise revenue would be to put these taxes on inelastic goods that, regardless of the prices, people would anyway purchase them. Dr. Tue Champon, is this the main reason why the price of crude oil and its constituents keep increasing in Ghana? The fact that government has no other option or has very few options in terms of raising revenue, and this is the absolute way to do it. Couldn't government have done it another way?
I mean, I would answer that question in just a moment, but I mean, just to go back a bit to the point that Rex was talking about, and the very beginning point about production of crude and then the refining. I mean, a small footnote point is the fact that not all the crude oil that is produced in Ghana actually belongs to Ghana, right? The private oil companies or the international oil companies have an entitlement share. So if you take 100 barrels of crude that is produced in Ghana, on average, Ghana's entitlement is about 15 or so percent, sometimes about 17%, which is about 17 barrels. Let's use that. Now we have a decision if we want to sell those barrels outside or refine those barrels in country and therefore then you at least would save some of the cost of potentially transporting or importing the product from outside. And then it goes back to the issues at store, which we can come to in a moment. But I just thought I put in just that small footnote point just to clarify that not all the crude oil that we produce in Ghana belongs to Ghana. There are other players in that game. Now, coming back to the question on the whole approach to taxation, I mean, let's be brutally honest. Governments, since the beginning of the Fourth Republic, we've actually become a bit lazy in terms of our approach to taxation, right? So Rex makes a fantastic point about the price elasticity of demand, basically driving, government wanting to impose taxes on these petroleum products because they know that even if you put 100% tax on it, people will still use it, and therefore, they will then raise revenue. But there are other ways of raising revenue within the wider, economy. It's just that the nature of the Ghanaian economy and most sub-Saharan African economies, you've got a lot of informality within the system. And that then means that it's very difficult to actually ask people to pay, pay as you earn, PAYE taxes or corporate income taxes, or those other forms, property taxes, another one, which then would have gone to augment, right, the revenue or the resource envelope, and then perhaps government wouldn't then have been forced to put in all these petrol taxes left, right, center, as we see every day. So it comes back really to the core point about the overall tax structure within the Ghanaian economy and how you formalize the economy and thereby rope in other sources of revenue beyond just every day. If you need revenue, then let's go and impose, taxes on product. Because there's also another interesting dimension, as I mentioned earlier on. Anytime there's a price increment, people feel it, and they feel it not just at the pump. It ripples through the overall economy, right? So transportation fare goes up, food prices go up, even entertainment, right? All those things go up, and invariably it eats into people's welfare or livelihood. And that is where the balance needs to be struck beyond just raising taxes, but also in a post-COVID context where you want to stimulate the economy and stimulate aggregate demand. You just have to be a little bit careful in terms of not wanting to push citizens a bit too much, over the edge. But the main point that I just wanted to raise after is the fact that putting taxes on petrol has become a lazy man's approach to taxation in Ghana.
Thank you very much. We will definitely come to the impact that such approach has on the citizenry in Ghana. But just a quick one, because you brought in the dimension that it's obviously a lazy man's approach, and in one breath you do not fault government because of the huge informal sector that we have. And so then the question I ask is that what else could government have done given the huge informality that do you think that there's another way that government could have approached this situation given the informality? What do you think government could do?
There are two solutions. First one is on the value for money argument. I don't believe the whole argument that you always need to raise more revenue. We need to have a big conversation in Ghana and within policy circles about the quality of spending, right, in Ghana. Because sometimes we collect these monies, but the report after report, or auditor generals, other ones, shows you that we're putting money into a leaking basket, basically. And consumers or citizens have basically ended up subsidizing the inefficiency of government across the board. So one of the things I think we can actually do is going back to the table and reviewing the overall spending pattern of government. So this is the expenditure side of the equation and less so of the revenue side of the equation. That's number one. Number two, I also think that when it comes to petroleum products specifically, not all of the products need to have some of those taxes. So for example, LPG, liquefied petroleum gas. A lot of households use that in Ghana for cooking. And there's a problem where anytime the price of LPG goes up, households then engage in what is called fuel stacking. So you end up going back to use charcoal or using maybe some inefficient ways of cooking. And you see that that is one costly, but from a health angle as well, is actually not good for the environment. So my proposal and solution is, at least on LPG, I have actually called for government to have some of those taxes on LPG just to smoothen the consumption for households, in the interim. And LPG, the evidence or the research shows that you have a little more elasticity. The demand elasticity on LPG is much higher than you have for, say, petrol and for diesel. So what that means is that consumers feel it when the price goes up, and households feel it, and it makes them ultimately poor. You'll be shocked when you look at the data on multidimensional energy poverty in Ghana, that although we have made improvements, we've basically stalled, right, over the past several years. So that's what I would say, really, in relation to that.
All right, thank you very much. We'll definitely come to what you said about ways to address the solution, particularly with your recommendation on the use of the LPG. It will be basically our last questions when we look at that. And so, Rex, Dr. Tio Champo makes the point that when you look at the petroleum that is produced in Ghana, I mean, barely 15 to 70%, that's what belongs to us. But we do hear things also like Ghana being a net exporter. I guess that also defeats this argument of, yes, indeed, Ghana is a net exporter, but at the end of the day, most of the benefits are not accrued by Ghanaians or are not owned by Ghana as a country. Is it then fair to say that regardless of being net exporters, it is not new or it is not strange that we struggle as a country to supply affordable fuel to its citizens? What's this connection of, what is its status of being net exporters? Does it add anything at all?
Honestly, currently it doesn't. And that's because of a capacity problem. I said that earlier. Because if you're working with 17% of ownership, it means that out of 100 barrels, you're only taking 17. What you do with the 17 depends on you. But then you are losing the remaining 83 to the big industry who have the capacity to explore and then to do the refinery. Now, what does this mean? It means that if Ghana is going to get to a level where you are able to contribute significantly on the world market for this product, you need to build capacity. But that also takes time. And this feeds generally into the broader concern for Ghana to and the managers of the economy specifically to focus on improving the structure of the economy in a way that benefits us in the long term, to focus more on production, right? Instead of just doing this consumption and prime exporting of primary products, because that has short-term benefits that can be eroded easily with any macroeconomic shock. What am I saying? I'm saying that according to Dr. Champo, Ghana is a price taker of from the world market. What does that mean? It means that if the oil, OPEC countries decide to cause a shortage and increase the price, we're going to struggle. Okay, and what that also means to us is that the managers of the economy need to now think about how do we do the import substitution in such a way that Ghana can be reliant on what we actually produce and be self-sufficient with the resources that we have at our disposal. Obviously, that is a long-term question, but you need to take the baby steps now and get things in place and in order, so that you are sure that in the next, like say 10 years, when we now have a conversation and say that Ghana is a net exporter, then we'll be talking more about controlling about 50% of the value chain, right? Because the resource is actually in the country, and we have the capacity to manage it. The other part to, as Dr. Champon said, is the approach to doing the management and the implementation of the taxes. Ordinarily, strictly from an academic perspective, if you expect to raise revenue from citizens, you must actually give them an incentive to spend. That is how British economists did it. Maynard Keynes did it, and basically that method has not failed. But we still have several constraining factors, especially legacy debts, and also internal political differences in the approach to managing petroleum revenues. And then finally, the reporting itself of the use of the petroleum revenues itself, is questionable. And these are issues that are raised in the Auditor General's reports, several other audit reports that keep coming up telling us that there are gaps in the way the petroleum revenues are used. So I'm not too enthusiastic about throwing around the term net exporter, because it doesn't really, I don't think it really changes much. What it actually tells us is that there is a structural issue that we need to address. I know that the managers of the economy know this, but getting this done, as always, as a country, we have beautiful laws, we write so many beautiful proposals, but when it comes to implementation, that's largely where we struggle. And this is also another thing that we are struggling with.
Thank you very much, Rex Esiama. So, I'm sure
can I add something small to Rex's point?
No.
Which is that, and I like to be blunt, there's just too much politics in a lot of the things that we do in Ghana. Like Rex was saying, even on the whole energy sector, that thing, we put in place a lot of policies as an energy sector recovery program. We were meant to have, dealt with most of the subsidies and the under recoveries in the sector. But as we still speak, we're still incurring a number of those, debt issues. Some of the state-owned enterprises that are supposed to be, quote unquote, running efficiently and effectively leave a lot to be desired. And it just goes back to the fundamental point. Besides the pricing and the architecture, the way the political economy and the political settlement system in Ghana works is also self-defeating in a way. And not until government, in my view, gets out of the way with or efficiently runs a number of these institutions, we'll just be dancing full circle. We'll come here next year, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, and we'll still be debating the same issues.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tio Champon. And maybe moving on, just a quick comparison here. How does the fuel prices in Ghana, for example, compare with other net exporters? I mean, it looks more like a fancy word for us, doesn't really add much to the economy as a net exporter, but we just want to get a sense of it. How does it compare to other countries that are also classified as net exporters of crude oil? Is it better in Ghana or is it worse? Dr. Tio Champon.
I don't have any specific data off the top of my head, but I remember a couple of years ago doing some work and basically doing some comparative analysis, at least of the West African sub-region. And at that time, petrol prices in Ghana were amongst the highest in the West African sub-region, often because of the tax component. on it. And also, then you also had quite a lot of smuggling taking place, in some of the border, countries as well. I don't know the latest data in terms of, to be able to specifically answer that comparative question. But the point which Resk brilliantly made is that the whole net, net importer argument really doesn't hold much water when one begins to peel and understand what really is happening within the Ghanaian context.
Thank you very much. Rex, would you like to add to that in terms of how Ghana's price compares to other nations?
There will be some differences. I think that's what Dr. Ichampol is talking about. I also do not have access to the latest data, but I can't speak about LPG because some time ago there was news of planned demonstrations on the prices of LPG. And according to the associations, they report that Ghana's prices on LPG are the highest in the sub-region. And that's, LPG in other Western African countries, the prices are lower than what we have here in Ghana. It goes back to the same issue about slapping on additional taxes, hoping to raise revenue, and just the lax way in which some of these things are handled. So in the end, being a net exporter at this stage, when you only have 17% of the concessions, is not anything, so impressive. If in the future, let's say in the next 5 years, when we have this conversation, and Ghana has increased its concessions to about 45 or 55%, maybe perhaps, and the capacity is there, then maybe perhaps we can say, okay, you're a net exporter, and these are your prices, and they look good, compared to countries in West Africa. But for now, I'm a bit skeptical on that part.
If I could ask this question, maybe it might be a bit technical, but talking about these concessions and the fact that we control nearly 15 to 17%, is it that is something which we can easily achieve as a country if we want to increase our concessions, or policy-wise, it is not something that we can easily achieve as a country? Maybe Dr. Tuyo Champo, you want to go first?
No, you cannot just change it because these are bound by the terms of the petroleum agreements, and for the fields that are already producing. So we have 3 producing fields in Ghana currently: Jubilee, 10, and then the ENI's Sankofa field. And these are governed by a petroleum agreement. And the petroleum agreement also has something that these are called stabilization clauses. So the government cannot just wake up one morning and say, I want to increase my take in those, or increase my equity in the contract. You can buy more extra equity, as GMPC just did with the divestment of one of the assets in the 10 field by Anadaco. You could do that, but then you actually have to pay for that. For future contracts that you sign, for sure, you can negotiate a much higher equity share or stake. But it just comes back to the legal provisions around the contract and the fact that you cannot just wake up one day and say you want to increase your stake in those contracts. And then a smaller point also about the LPG, because that's a pet topic of mine. Because you see consumers, it's the main fuel choice for a lot of households, actually in the urban and the peri-urban communities. And increasingly these days, even in the rural places as well. When I visited my grandmother in the village a few years ago, she was actually cooking with LPG. But the data also shows that in Ghana, only 23%, so only 2 in 10 of the population have access to any form of clean cooking fuels as of 2019, right? And we've also made the point that these people then tend to switch quite easily to like charcoal and other forms if the price of fuel or LPG goes up. And then another statistic, just to give it a bit of context, is that rural people in Ghana are twice as energy poor as the urban folks. So within all of this, if you want to deepen energy access, if you want to get people to use cleaner forms of energy, then surely the way around that is not to, at least on LPG, put more taxes on that, because that would be, discouraging.
Thank you very much. Rex, I don't know whether you would want to add in terms of...
No, he's put it perfectly. Yeah, he's put it perfectly.
All right, thank you very much. If you are just joining us on Facebook or right here on Zoom, we welcome you to today's edition or episode of CEPSA Talk. And today we are looking at the fuel price hikes in Ghana, bread and butter issues. Our guests have been Rex Esiama and Dr. Tio Echampon. And I have one very long message here on Facebook from AK Mensa. I would read it out and ask your views here. I don't know if my question falls in line, but what are key parameters that determine the revenue from the Ghana's oil sector, to be specific? Is it always attributed to the price of the good from the international market? Are there papers that decompose the main components of the oil revenue? That's because in the gold mining sector, revenue growth has largely been attributed to price of the metal at the international market. But one analysis we did showed that that's not always the case, as the revenue could be driven by output/production of the metal. Well, I'm pretty much sure this question has been answered already by our guest here, particularly at the very beginning when Dr. Tio Echampon listed the three main drivers of the fuel prices. But
so maybe just to clarify, and sorry if I'm hijacking it a bit, but I think it's an important question that Albert is asking, in the sense that there are three revenue streams. You've got to look at the revenue as pertains to the upstream side of the business, where you're producing like the crude oil and selling, and that is driven by two things: the price of the crude oil that you sell, but also the cost recovery provisions, and then even the fiscal regimes, right? So the tax element, the royalties, the corporate income tax, and then the windfall taxes. That's one. And then we also need to look at the revenue when it comes to the midstream and the downstream segment of the market. That's what we addressed at the very sort of beginning, where when it comes to that side of the business or the market, the revenue is really more a function of the taxes that government is actually putting on these products. So there's no specific tax regime or fiscal regime that governs the relation or the operations when it comes to the downstream and the midstream segment of the market. They operate like any other company does. They would only pay their corporate income tax and whatever it is that the government charges as margins and levies. But on the upstream side of the business, where you produce the oil, then you do have a very special fiscal regime or tax arrangement that governs that relationship.